So it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Faribur Namoon, who lives in Canada, in Vancouver. Now, I came across Faribur because of his great enthusiasm for matters like the calendar and ancient Iran in general. And I know he has his own website, so if you want to follow up what he's interested in, you can do that. He also was so enthusiastic about our religion that he even started his own magazine called Iran Zamin, which is both in Persian, Farsi, and in English. He carries articles from contributors in either language. Now, Faribur has been flown over specially by WZO to be present for this annual seminar, and of course he's going to take advantage of it by speaking to other groups, but please bear in mind that WZO is behind the seminars that we organise and bringing speakers over because we believe it's very important that the knowledge of our religion should be shared and spread. Faribur went to school in Bombay. Now, that meant that as a Zoroastrian from Iran, rather like myself, a Zoroastrian born in England, we had the benefit of being educated in the Christian system, and we were able to therefore make comparisons and ask questions. Why is it that the Christians do this and we don't? And why is it that we do this and the Christians don't? And in that way, Faribur has developed a very healthy curiosity and interest in his own religion from an early age. And that interest, although he had to follow and have a career, and he ended up, as many Iranians do, using his science background, becoming an engineer of some sort, I believe. Am I right, Faribur?
I'm an accountant.
Pardon me? Accountant, that's right. That's another very typical Parsi pursuit, that perhaps being in Bombay influenced him in that direction. He became an accountant because one has to earn one's living somehow. But his interest and curiosity did not ever leave him, and he clearly wanted to pursue his knowledge and take it to a higher level. But when he tried to get onto a doctoral program, he did not like the way that they wanted him to approach it, so he ended up being his own teacher. So he's an autodidact, he's on his own research, and he's come up with his own conclusions. Now, we've heard how priests are trained in Bombay, and of course in Iran also there is a tradition of priestly training, but a lot of that is recitation and learning by heart, whereas Faribur has done his own research, and he's come up with his own conclusions about different things, amongst which, very centrally, is focused his idea about the calendar. And I think he's given out, for those who haven't picked one up, a calendar based on his own understanding of how the calendar should be organised. I'm going to pass on the floor to Faribur just in a second, but to say that we're going to hear later on from Jimmy, our priest resident here, about the Zoroastrian way of life as experienced and understood by him as a priest. And now we're going to hear from Faribur about the history and the transmission of the history of our religion and how we are where we are today, and perhaps along the way why some things got a bit muddled up. So over to Faribur for a better understanding of the history of Zoroastrianism. Thank you. Of the teachings, history of the teachings of Zoroastrianism.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I've got to keep an eye on the time, so I've just left my timepiece behind.
She mentioned the calendar. The calendar is not my invention. It is in the Bundaesh, and it says how you have to have it, and I've just put that on paper. So it's not an invention. It is the only calendar that is mentioned in our books, and that's in the Bundaesh. The other 4 calendars that we have time has created them, not our books. So that's the difference. And today I'm going to tell you about the history of mostly the Gathas and how our religion has changed over the centuries. And why has it changed? And how has it changed? But first I will give you a presentation of the very Gathas as they should have been, and I'll tell you why it has been mistranslated the way we have it in our books today. So tradition is stagnation, culture is progress. This is very clear. Culture means you're cultured, you progress, you don't stick to a tradition. But religion makes you stick to a tradition. Zarathustra's teaching was about how to use your good mind, Bahumana, to progress towards perfection, Bhurvatata, and become immortal, Amartata. Immortal doesn't mean that you will not die. You will die, but your name will remain because of what you have done, having become perfect. So let's go and see what happened to them, because this Bahumana, Bhurvatata, Amartata all became personified. They became angels, they became Yazatas, they became human-like. And we call them to our prayers. But is it that? Let's see. So 3787 years ago, Zarathustra, the sage of ancient Iran, was born on the 6th day after the vernal equinox, in the year 1768 BCE. So this itself dismisses all the calendars, because he was born on the 6th day after the vernal equinox, after Nowruz. He was not happy with the religious system of his time, so he set out in search of truth and finally found it. Now, how did he find it? Good dawned on the mind, revealing Asha, a gift of long-standing truth. Truly words of wisdom to Zarathustra, mental power, the joy which leads us to creation, also that adversaries and hatred we may overcome. So it all came to him by concentrating, by reading, by understanding nature. And it is the gift of Asha. Asha is the whole universe, the whole system in nature. And he got his information from nature. And this is what he's going to tell us to do also. So he's not giving it to himself. Sorry. Thereafter his only prayers was, this I seek with reference, with uplifted hands, the perfectness of the mind. He didn't want anything else from anywhere. All he wanted was the perfectness of his mind. A better thinking process. Wisdom is the first righteous gift of Asha. All should aspire to make good use of the intelligence of the mind to create harmony between the universe and the inner self. And the whole idea is that when you pray, when you want to do something, you do something where your inner self, your conscious, is in line with nature. Don't go against nature. What we are doing today is we have gone against nature, we have got global warming, we have got all the problems in the world because we have gone against nature. Zarathustra's only prayer was that he wants the perfectness of his mind, and that should help him to go with nature and get his inner self in line with nature. When he presented his findings, he was considered an atheist. Why was he an atheist? Because he was going against all the gods that were already existing. Today you go against the God that you know today, and you're an atheist. He was an atheist too, because he went against the gods that were existing. At the age of 30, he presented his finding to King Vishtas of Balkh. And what did he tell him? Now these shall I speak to those eager, the quality of wisdom that all the wise praise, and creation worthy of praise, and the good creation of the mind, the truthful knowledge of Asha, truly that more and better ways are discovered toward perfection. His aim was perfection. If you're a doctor, a perfect doctor. If you're a farmer, a perfect farmer. His aim was that, and he presented a system to Vishtas of how to go about that. King Vishtas consulted his wise Wazir, Jamas and Prashaushatra, both of whom were impressed by Zarathustra's presentation. King Vishtas accepted the teachings of Zarathustra and made a proclamation that in his kingdom, wisdom shall rule. No God, wisdom shall rule. Given the Asha that results in goodness, gained through the mind, truly gives righteousness. Vishtas desired for his people and decreed that wisdom shall rule and that these words shall be carried out by all grades, no exception. If you're a priest, if you're a layperson, if you're an engineer, if you're a doctor, everyone will follow wisdom. And wisdom is not a deity, wisdom is what you have. in different sort of expanses. So also did Fasho Shatra proclaim, best to supreme. If I'm the best, I still want to go forward and become the supreme. With Asha's supreme harmony, creative research was the desire of Vadi Fasho Shatra. For his people and other people. He's not going to keep it for only for his own people. Everybody can do it. Other people can do it too. And even to show the way to all of the limitless good creation of the mind. So it was not something that we had to keep it to ourselves. We had to give it to others too and get the whole world to follow the right path and expand on knowledge. Now this is the core principle. This core principle is very important and what has been made into angels and we have lost it. Zarathustra did not present a list of do's and don'ts, nor did he present the answer to all the mysteries of the universe. Instead, he gave a formula that would help each individual solve the mysteries and lead the world towards perfection, towards wholeness, towards a better life, a heavenly life on earth. Not after death. Heaven is on earth. Truly the Asha, derived by the good mind, never before known among the wise in all creation, with it make good rules, never waning, increasing righteousness, leading us towards perfection. So these are the first 5 Amshas Pandans, the first 5 steps that you need to take to progress towards perfection. And this is in the Gathas. This is in the Gathas but has been mistranslated because they have been personified. So they say, oh Bahuman, come to me. No, it's not Bahuman, it's not something that's come to you, it's there. You have to use it. And the right translation is this. The reward. Now you do something good, what reward do you want? Gold, diamond, dollars, pounds? No. You say this is the reward. There is no promise of heaven or hell. The aim is happiness on earth and the reward is not in dollars and gold, but in earning a good name and a place in the memories of people for generation. Amurta, immortality. You do something good, you find something new, you are remembered for generation and then you are immortal. We are today all over the world. Our family back in India and Iran don't see us, but they remember us. Now if they're dead, if they still remember us, that's Amurta. And they remember us for what we have done. Now if we have done something good, big for the country will remember us. The world will remember us. For our family will remember us. And how is that done? And those who are righteous are known for the good deeds and the use of the wise mind in a righteous way, in harmony with the wisdom in existence. Their aim achieved, their desire assuredly happiness. All they want is happiness, nothing else. Their reward, knowledge, and being known as righteous, faithful, and praiseworthy. So the reward is not in gold and diamonds and going to heaven after that. It's all of creating a heaven over here, living in it, being good, and when you do something good, the happiness that you get, that is the reward. Oh, I did this. I found out the cure to cancer. I found out the cure to this. Or I did a farming that just boomed. That's the reward. And the final reward is, of course, Amrita. Later, these were tabulated and called the eternal laws, Amisha Sapantas. Amisha Sapanta, the very name tells you, in Gujarati we say Hamisha. In Hindi we say Hamisha. In Farsi we say Hamisha. And that's Amisha Sapanta, the law that is eternal, the eternal law. And how is it? Bahumana Bahman, the good mind. Use the good mind to inquire and learn the ultimate truth that is in Asha. The laws of nature. Use them to make good rules, Sharivar. Good laws, good products, which will lead to Sapanta Almighty, that is lawful desire, righteousness, which will pave the way towards perfection. Mental, physical, and spiritual, which will lead to Amartata, Amurdar. immortality. In death, being remembered for the good work for generation. In life, losing the fear of death. Once you lose the fear of death, then that is not very important to you. You are a different person, and that you achieve because you have progressed spiritually to a stage where death is nothing for you. It's just meaningless, and that's the achievement. And when you are at that stage, you see the God which is within you. The God is within you. And we in Persian, in Hindi, in Gujarati, we say Khud A. Khuda. Khud A. It's two words. Khud means self, and A is to come to yourself. That's self-realization. When you realize yourself, you reach that stage of mentality, you will see God within yourself. And Jesus Christ, to whom we gave the three gifts of Vahumana Shavesham Khashatravedu, said, I and the Father are one. And the poor guy was stoned by the Jews. He was a student of Zoroastrianism, and he has done a lot to help you understand this. Thus Zarathustra introduced a God that was not anthropomorphic, it was not human-like, but a God that everyone could realize and be one with by following the 7 steps. He said Ahura Mazda does not interfere in the day-to-day events on earth. Like if there is an earthquake or a hurricane, it is not Ahura Mazda punishing you. It is nature going its natural course, in which case Zarathustra's advice was that we should use our mind to find ways to live in harmony with nature. In Japan, they realized that they live on a land that's created by earthquakes, by volcanoes. So today, there's a 7 Richter earthquake. The bottle from the shelf doesn't fall down. They have built the shelves, they have built the buildings in such a way that it doesn't affect them. 7 Richter. That happens in Iran, everything is gone. So they have used the Vahumana to create a system where they live in harmony with nature. And this is the verse that tells you about Ahura Mazda not being involved. Through these, not Ahura Mazda, Asha also brings fury. So if there's an earthquake, it's Asha doing its job. It's not punishing you. It's nature. Nature has its own way. And what do? Mind is the best which strives to give good guidance to you, for you to be worthy, mighty, satisfied, also worthy of praise. So you have to use your mind to be worthy of praise. You have to use your mind to live a better life by living in harmony with nature. To achieve perfection, every person is free to choose a path, a profession of their liking from among the best. Now, if you have read the Gathas, this verse is very famous. It is famous in the sense that we tell the world, oh, we have got freedom of choice. This is the freedom of choice that we have. And we can choose between good and bad. No. It says the best. How can the best have evil in it? And the important thing is that there is no mention of two. The word twa, which means two, is not existing over there. But every translator has translated because we have a background of dualism, which has been imposed upon us. It's not in the Gathas. It has been imposed upon us by Mani and Mazdak, who were prophets in the time of Sassanians, and they were just put to sleep. Well, some of the kings followed him and some killed him. But anyways, these teachings have entered into our system, and although it is not in this verse, our translators have translated the parts as two parts, and evil and goodness which is not there, they have increased. So what does it say? Listen with your ears to the best, consider with open mind, among the paths, engineer, doctor, farmer, whatever, before deciding, person by person for his own self, before greatness of this message is truly spread, understand each one. So you have to understand your profession and go to the top of that profession. That is what it's saying. And you don't have to follow anybody. You have to find what suits you, what's in your inner self, whether you will be you have a liking for engineering, or you have a liking for farming, or you have a liking for anything. Just go by that, not which will pay you more. We go on what will pay us more. I went and did an accounting course because at that time in Bombay, commerce was on the top. Science, if you would go, they would take your SSC certificate right there. Commerce, you had to stand in line for 2 days. But we went to commerce because they were going to pay us more. That's not what we have to do. Zarathustra wanted people to live a happy life. He said happiness is in your hand. With your wisdom, you can make your life a happy one or a painful and miserable one. So happiness is not coming from outside. Happiness is over here. You give it to yourself. You go home and fight with your wife or husband, and you'll have whatever, and you go and just give a kiss on the cheek, and there you'll have a happier day that day. So these laws, you understand that wisdom has given humans happiness and pain, and that practice of evil harms progress and the followers of truth, and as a result of this shall come elimination. So it is your thinking that can make you happy, it is your thinking that can make you sad. And if you are a leader like Trump, you can make the whole world sad. Although he has made America very rich in the last 2 years, their economy is booming, but he's made the whole world unhappy, and it's his wisdom. He's not doing anything, he's just thinking. His thinking is wrong, and that's what's creating it. So this is what Zarathustra is telling, that it is your wisdom that will create happiness or pain for you. Those that follow Zarathustra's teaching live a happy and prosperous life. The Cyrus cylinder is a testimony to their deeds. The clay tablet found in Persepolis is further proof. In an era when slaves were used to building temples and monuments, the Persians built Persepolis with paid labor, no slaves, and even employed women who were paid maternity leave. And these things I'm not saying from anywhere. It's in the tablets that they found in Persepolis and are in Chicago University and have been translated. So they paid maternity leave, not only employed women, they gave them maternity leave, and the tablets tell you all about that. Cyrus and Darius were not exceptions. A century later, here is what Xenophon, who said in his book Anabasis about Cyrus, the brother of Ardashir. This is another Cyrus. He was not a king, he was just a governor, and he was the brother of the king Ardashir II. The cities which were in Kurush's command trusted him, and so did the band. And the enemies he had were confident that once Cyrus has signed a treaty with them, nothing would happen to them contrary to the terms of the treaty. When 2 of his mercenary generals leave Kurush without permission, he says, Xenia and Pasha have left us, but they can be sure enough that they have not gone out of reach. I know the way they have gone, and they have thus escaped me. I have boats which could overtake their ships, but by heaven I am not going to pursue them. Although I can, I am not going to pursue them. No one shall say that I make use of men while he is in my service, and then when he wants to leave, that I arrest him and ill-treat him and take away his property. No, let them go with the knowledge that they have behaved worse to us than we have to them. It is true that I hold the children and women under guard at Tellus, but they will not lose them. Not even the children. They are in my possession, I hold them, but I'll give it back to them. No, they will get them back again in return for the good service that they did me in the past. So even those people who went against him, he was ready to forgive them for what they had done to him before, the help they had given it to him before. So that's Zoroastrianism in full swing. Now this is another part. When he, Kurush, saw that a man was capable administrator, acting as on just principles, improving the land under the control and making it bring in profit, he never took away his post from him, but always gave him additional responsibility. The result was that his administrators did their work cheerfully and made money confidently. Cyrus was the last person whom they kept in dark about the possessions, since he showed no envy of those who became rich openly, but on the contrary tried to make use of the wealth of the people who attempted to conceal them. People who were truthful, people who were correct, people who did everything openly, he helped them. He gave them more power. But those who were under the table, he made use of whatever they had. Then often when Cyrus or Kurosh had particular good wine, he used to send jars half full of it to his friends with a message. Cyrus has not for a long time come across a better wine than this, so he has sent some of it to you and wants you to finish it up today with those whom you love best. Again, he wants them to do the same. I'm giving you this, but don't have it all by yourself. Share it with your friends whom you love. Cyrus enjoyed this, so he wants you to taste it too. When there was a scarcity of fodder, though he himself, because of his number of servants and his own wise provision, was able to get hold of it, he used to send round to his friends and tell them, give the fodder to your horse. They rode themselves so that the horse that carried his friends would not go hungry. So the characters of Zarathustra, we thought that it's only Cyrus and Darius and all that. No, it's there in this Cyrus also, who is not a king. He's the governor. He's the brother of Ardashir II, 100 years after that. And now this is important. And that in the same book, he explains to us how the Romans were. Just pay attention to this. The mercenaries had been, Cyrus had taken some, in this book it's about the 10,000 soldiers that he had engaged to fight against his brother. I don't know how Zoroastrianism is there, but he wanted to get the throne from his brother. And here you should know that the mother was a Babylonian. The mother of this Cyrus was a Babylonian, and she instigated him to go and get the throne. So he took 10,000 soldiers with him from the Roman Empire, Romans, and went, and they got defeated. Now when they got defeated, and Cyrus was killed. Cyrus was killed, the soldiers were defeated, and they were returning. This is the story about them. The mercenaries had been defeated by the Persians and forced to retreat to Kurdistan, where the Kurds were waiting for them at a narrow pass. The following discussion takes place with the mercenary general Chrysippus and Xenophon, who wrote the book, as to who between them would be a better candidate to steal the narrow pass from the Kurds. If anybody has gone to Kurdistan, Kurdistan is all mountains. And in the lush valleys, they have the cities. But to get to that valley, you have to go to the mountain pass. And if they could get a strategic point on one of the mountains, they could just wipe out an army. Even now when you go to Kurdistan, you can see, you have the feeling. It's a narrow pass going through the mountains, everywhere is mountains, and then you see a lush valley. And if they control those heights, they can stop any army from going. And then Alexander also had a hard time over there. So he says, what do they discuss? But I'm not the person who ought to be talking about stealing. I gather that you Spartans, Chrysippus, that is Chrysippus, I mean the real officer class, study how to steal from your earliest boyhood and think that so far from it being a disgrace, it is an actual distinction to steal anything that is not forbidden by law. You can still steal if it is not forbidden by law. And so that you may become expert thieves and try to get away with what you steal, it is laid down by law that you get a beating if you are caught stealing. If you are not caught stealing, you are the best thief, you have done your job, keep it up. This remains the principle of our legal system to this day, and here is the continuation of the same code which is an example of the basis of the social, economic and political system. Now here, that was for Xenophon, now this is for Chrysippus. Well said, Chrysippus. What I have gathered about you Athenians, that is Xenophon, is that you are remarkably good in stealing public funds. Sound familiar? Even though it is very risky business for whoever does so, and your best men are the greatest experts at this, that is if it is your best men who are considered the right people to be in the government. So here is a chance for you to give us an exhibition of the way in which you were brought up. So they are discussing this, who will lead the army to defeat the Kurds and get the pass and walk away from this area, enclosed area, which they want to go back to Rome. And this is what they say. They don't accuse each other. They're saying that you're good in this. He says, you're good in this, now let's see who can do a better job. And it sounds familiar after 2,400 years, right? That's our system. Now, they couldn't defeat the Romans because they were good soldiers. So a time came that they said, let's give them knowledge and bring them up and let them be better people. So the opponents of the Persians were the Greeks and the Romans, who had many mythological gods. Most of the gods were tyrants and played chess with humans as the pawns. They needed to be bribed with sacrifices. The Greeks were equally strong fighters, so the Persians tried to influence them by sharing knowledge through the Greeks who lived on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean in modern Turkey. We had conquered Sardis, that is up to the end of the Turkish border, on this side of the Mediterranean. And there were Greeks there. So we trained those Greeks and sent them to Rome to influence those people. In 449 BC, Ardashir signed a peace treaty with the Greeks. It came a time when they signed a peace treaty with them, and we see a sudden influx of philosophers in Athens. Most of the philosophers were born in the Persian Empire and then moved to Athens initially. They were not accepted, and Socrates was put to death for introducing an alien god not acceptable to the system. Everyone knows that Socrates was given poison to drink because what he said was not according to the Roman system. And he happily drank the poison, but he did not give up his principles. That's Amor-Dad. That's where he had conquered death. That was no question. He didn't want to live. You read that part of the story, and he says, how can I live without telling the truth? I'd rather die. And he drinks the poison. His friends tell him, you can still live till sunset. He said, doesn't make any difference, another sunset. He drinks it and finishes. He was Amor-Dad. And they didn't accept him because he was introducing a new system where he had good and bad and evil and this and how to proceed and all that. So he was. But if you go and look at it, all the philosophers came after 499. They were born round about that period. They were 17, 18 years old, and they became philosophers and flourished in Athens. The big change in the paradigm. Finally, Alexander defeats the Persian, and Aristotle, his tutor, advises him to destroy the Persian culture. He is reported to have said, if you destroy the Persians, you will destroy one of the pillars of excellence in the world, and our culture will rule the world. How true. Today even the Persian god Ahura is anthropomorphic like every other god. And we're happy that our God matches everybody else's God. And we have angels like the rest of the world have. And we are going ahead with our Roman system. The forgotten genocide. This is the most important thing that we as Zartushtis have forgotten. We as Zartushtis don't do anything about it. Recently there is a group that has started in November, I think it's November 16. They try to celebrate the Battle of Nahawand and all that, to bring back the memories and tell people about the history. But we as Zartushtis have completely forgotten about it. The final blow came in the form of Islam by the hands of the Arabs. Over 20 million Zartushtis were massacred over a period of 1400 lunar years. They killed so many that there was no one left to talk about it. According to Tabari, the Arab historian, for 20 farsan, that is 120 kilometers, Zartushtis were hung on two sides of the road leading to the city of Gorgan for the Khalifa to pass through. Now, Gorgan was a place in northern Iran which had stood very strongly against the Arab invasion. And for years they had been able to defeat the Arabs. And finally they defeated the Zartushtis, and when they defeated them, they punished them seriously. They had 120 kilometers, both sides of the road, Zartushtis hanging. And this is not recorded by any Zartushti. This is recorded by Tabari, the Arab historian, who has also given Islam the Hadith. There is the Quran and there is the Hadith. Where the Quran doesn't explain, the Hadith explains. These two go together for any Muslim. And the author is the same author that has given us this information. Scholars were burned in the fire of the books, and the children were forbidden to read and write. Tongues that spoke Persian were cut. About 100,000 lucky ones fled and took refuge in India and are today famous as Parsis. The rest were reduced to 7,711 heads by 1854 when Maliki Limji Hatalia, with help of the British, came to the rescue. If Manikji had not come at that time, today I would not be standing here, many of the Iranians would not be here. They would have been finished too. Manikji came, saw the condition, went back, collected money and brought, with the help of the British, paid the jizya tax every year. Because jizya was very demanding. If you didn't have money, they would first take your books away, that's how we lost a lot of books. Then they would take your daughter, then they would take your wife, they would just punish you in different ways. And if the king wanted $1, the taxpayer would collect 5, because he wanted 1, he had to give to the governor 1, he had to give to the other people 1, and finally the king would get 1. So that's how they were treated. Thousands were killed. Iran, with all the population, some of them converted, and most of them were killed. And initially, when you have for 120 kilometers, you have people hanging on two sides. That was not one. I just don't have time for it. There's a whole new story where you can see. They killed so many Zartushtis because the Khalifa said, I want to have my bread made with the blood of the Zartushtis. So they killed so many Zartushtis that the watermill had to turn with the blood of the Zartushtis. And it was so thick that they had to add water. They killed so many more people than necessary that they had to add water to make the blood flow and churn the wheels of the mill to grind the corn. The Parsis, now the funny part is over here, and we heard Kerman talk about it. The Parsis sought clarification on religious matters from those brethren left behind in Iran. The proof of it is in the various riwayats. The knowledge of the Avesta language was zero among both communities. So we had some rituals, we knew what to do about rituals, but as far as the Avesta language was concerned, no movement, not in Iran, not in India, knew the language. The maximum that in India they knew was the Pahlavi language. So Avesta was unknown to both communities. The Avesta manuscripts were first translated in 1759 by a French scholar, Duperreau. The Vandidad was considered the main discourse between Zarathustra and Ahura Mazda, because if you read the Vandidad, it says, Zarathustra asked and Ahura Mazda said. So this is a discourse between God and the Prophet, and that was very important. And it's still important in India. Then in 1858, Professor Martin Haig of Germany discovered the Gathas from the Avesta based on the language. So please note the gathas were discovered only 180 years ago. It was all the time in our books. But we didn't know the difference in the yasanas, who was the author of what. It was Martin Hay that saw there is a difference in the language, like having Shakespeare in English and the rest of the English in one book, and he said this is Old English. And that led into the fact that this is the Gatha, this is what Zarathustra has said. The initial translators were all followers of the Abrahamic religion. They unwittingly injected in the translation the Abrahamic thoughts. They created angels out of Yazatas, and then Shasvandans became the bountiful immortals. When they saw the word Mazda Ahura, now remember it's Ahura Mazda is the God, but even Mazda Ahura they said it's God. So when they saw the word Mazda Ahura and the word creation together in verse 28.11, they assumed that it was the equivalent of Genesis in the Bible. But since the creation story was not found in the Gathas, they turned into a question presuming that Zarathustra was asking God to reveal to him the story of creation. Zarathustra was not concerned how God created the earth. He was more concerned on what you are going to create. Because you're sitting on a chair made by human. We are using everything made by men. And we are using it to destroy what God has made. And Zarathustra didn't want us to do that. He was less concerned about how God created the earth. What is going to help him if he knows it? And he was not asking that question. He was not even asking a question. But the translators who had in the background the Genesis, and when they saw the word Angahush, which means creation, and they saw Mazda Ahura, which is not God, but which they translated to God, they said, oh, he's asking God, and everybody says, oh, Ahura Mazda, we want to hear it from your mouth. They also assume that Zarathustra has got a mouth. Ahura Mazda has got a mouth, and we want to hear it from your mouth. Now, what is the actual verse? If you translate it word by word, without moving the words around, without trying to inject your own thoughts into it, keep the words where they are. Forget that you're a linguist. Forget the grammar. Just leave the words where they are. This is what comes out. A word-by-word translation is a blueprint for the right way to progress, which has been lost to modern science, which is progressing dangerously towards genetic engineering and global warming. When in pursuit of Asha is nature, and everything is in nature. Today all our medicines are coming from nature. First we go and research nature and then we get it. Then today they are trying to find how an ant can pick 10 times its weight so that they can make a better crane. They are learning from nature. We learn from nature everything that we do. So, but when you're going to learn that, when you're going to try to find out from nature, keep your thoughts good forever. So if you find the atom, don't make an atom bomb. Keep your thoughts good forever. In harmony with the wisdom in creation. That's the Mazda Ahura. The wisdom that is in creation. Keep your thoughts in line with that. Train yourself to declare those thoughts by words of mouth. For that's when creation first comes into being. So you have a thought. I want to make something that will do such and such a thing. You think about it, and then Zarathustra, you forget it. So bring it to words. But bring only those two words that which are good, that are in harmony with nature. If it's not in harmony with nature, you better forget it. Don't bring it to words. So you bring it to words, and when the moment you bring that to words, the creation of that appears. That's the first step for the creation. If you don't tell, it's gone. But if you tell, that's the first step you have taken to create something. So it is not the word mouth of Ahura Mazda, it is your thoughts that you bring to your mouth, which translators have given it to Ahura Mazda. although there is no Ahura Mazda in this verse. So, this is the good thoughts, good words, good deeds. You ask any translators that have translated the Gathas, they won't give you a verse for that because they have mixed it up with Genesis of the Bible and changed this into a question. This is a freer translation of that, doing what other translators have done to make it appear more easily into your, without explanation. Everything that is created was first a thought, so let your thoughts be good. Good thoughts are those that are in harmony with the wisdom in creation. Let your good thoughts be known through good words, for that's when creation first comes into being. The fact is that Zarathustra was more interested in stopping us from messing up the creation of God like we are today by way of global warming. Today's Zarathustrians are following the Abrahamic Greek version of the religion and rightly call it by its Greek name Zoroastrianism. All religions claim to believe in one God and call it monotheism, but in reality the God of every monotheistic religion is different. Otherwise there would be one religion. One says, if they slap you here, bring the other cheek. The other one says, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So this can't be the same God. And both say that we are monotheistic. Each individual has his own explanation and mental image of God. In other words, your God is the creation of your wisdom and my God is the creation of my wisdom. I would say that Hindus have fewer gods than the followers of monotheism because Hindu gods are depicted by way of statues, so each group has at least a common image of the God. But each one of us built the image. Neither did any of the prophets see God. Muhammad did see God, he heard it from Jibreel. Moses or Abraham saw burning bush with the voice of God. So nobody has seen God, none of the prophets, and none of us have seen it. But we all know God. And the first thing we want to know is about God. And where does it come from? What do you think about it? And that is Ahura Mazda. Ahura is creation, Mazda is wisdom. So Ahura Mazda is the creation of wisdom. My wisdom, your wisdom, the wisdom of Muhammad, the wisdom of Jesus, the wisdom of whoever. And Zarathustra has been very truthful. He does not deny God. There is a God. But the God that you are talking about is what you think is God. Because you have not seen God. Now in the translated Gathas there are 353 times God. Why? Because in the untranslated Gathas, Ahura Mazda is mentioned only 8 times. The rest are Mazda, which is wisdom, 164 times. Ahura, which is creation, 131 times. Mazda Ahura, which is the wisdom in creation, 50 times. And Ahura Mazda, God, creation of wisdom, only 8 times. That totals to 500. And how many verses? 240 verses. So in each, if you look at it, it's 1.3 God in every verse. Now when you have God in that verse, you have to change the words around while forming the sentence to make it something to do with God. Like that which I told you. Creation and God in one. So how did God create the universe? Tell me. What else can you do? But it was not God over there. It was the wisdom in creation, and He was telling you that your thoughts should be in harmony with the wisdom in creation. There is one God, but everyone sees it differently and kills to impose their version. The truth is nobody has seen God, so our God is the wisdom of the creation of our wisdom. The God of Zarathustra is within us. Each one can only see the God within by self-realization. Such a God cannot be imposed. The need to impose does not arise. How can I tell you to follow my God? You have your God in your heart, find it and see what you can do about it. Jesus was the recipient of the 3 gifts, Vahumana, Asha Vaishta and Khashatravedyu. He realized God and said, I and the Father are one. The Jews stoned him for blasphemy. Now when I say that Vahumana Asha Vishna and Kashatra Virya, I'm not saying on my own. I'm referring to Bible, and any one of you can go and read the chapter 4 by Matthew and Luke. Matthew and Luke have both repeated that a little differently, but they explain these three Amshaspanams like I told you in the previous thing. First is the use of the mind in a good way. Asha is the nature, the laws of nature, and Kashatra use the laws that you make based on your knowledge of what you have recovered from nature, what you have learned from nature. And Jesus Christ has followed that. If we understand and teach the Gathas in its original form, like it was gifted to baby Jesus, the problem of the world will be solved. Jesus, the recipient of the three Amshaspanam, preaches the other four, Sabanta or Maiti, which is righteousness. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds those of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Hurtata, that is perfection. Be ye therefore perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. John 10.28. They follow me and I give them eternal life, amarta, immortality, self-realization. I and the Father are one. If the 2 billion followers of Jesus understand the 7 Amshaspanams as preached by Jesus Christ, the world will be a better place. I've talked to a lot of priests, and I tell them what are the 3 gifts. They say gold, because he was king, they gave him gold because he was... I said, but the Bible says something different, go and read that. Oh, that's the devil doing it. That's it, because all the questions that were put to him in Matthew chapter 4 were negative. But they want him to not use his mind. They tell him, you are the Son of God, you are hungry, because he was taken to the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, not given any food to eat. And then the devil tells them, you are the Son of God, you are hungry, turn the stones into bread and eat them. How can you turn a stone into bread? By creating Facebook. By creating something which is superficial. Without Facebook you would leave. But no, he created Facebook, he created money, he created bread for himself, and took our information and selling. There's nothing concrete coming out of that except misusing the information. So that's what Jesus was told to do, and he didn't do it, not using his mind in the right way. Anyways, that's a different story. If you have something good, you do not copyright it. The Gathas wants you to share it with others. This is for those Orthodox people who say that Zoroastrianism has to be born and cannot be given to anyone else. You have to be born as Zoroastrian. The Gatha doesn't say that. It says, Asha when he gained, with mind's good use, having realized wisdom, the path to creativity, the ultimate message of wisdom, through word excellence, we shall turn or convert those who do not know by speaking. You don't have to force upon anyone, and we have never forced, even when we were the empire, we never forced it. But we gave knowledge. We sent scholars, philosophers to Greek to convert them. We didn't send soldiers. So we are supposed to give. If you have something good, you have to give it to others. Now I would like to share with you another fact that we are lost and need to revive. So that was a very brief gist. I could talk for hours on the Gathas, but I give you a brief gist of what this translation was. You saw the translation. If you have a Gatha at home, you won't find it over there. And I have not created anything. I am not a linguist. I have just taken the words as translated by others, but not moved them around. Not put my thoughts into it. I have left it where they are. And when you leave them where they are, what I have translated, that's what you get. You can do it too. Take Tara Porwala's book. He has given meaning for each word. Leave them over there. Don't move them around. And you will translate what I have translated. I don't take credit for it. It's Tara Porwala, Ubed Azar Gushas. in Persian who have done that job, and I've just taken it and said I'm not going to move it around. I'm going to keep it where it is. And you get what I got. Now I've got two more things to tell you, and we have lost. We have to do something about it. After being accepted by Vishtas, Zarathustra goes and settles on the bank of Lake Hamun. Lake Hamun is in Iran, in Sistan. It's on the top, on the border with Afghanistan. So he settles in the kingdom of Balkh and practices what he preached. He was interested in mathematics and astronomy. He wanted to achieve perfection in them, and has left behind a legacy which we need to help revive. We owe it to Zarathustra. We have forgotten it, we have misunderstood it, we don't know it, and we are following what others are telling us. We should understand that, and we should help revive it. He calculated that at 63 degrees longitude in Balkh, where he lived, when the sun was at midday position, there was sunshine over the entire hemisphere, from Japan and Australia in the east to Europe and Africa in the west. He calculated the natural meridian of the earth, not here in London, it's in Afghanistan. And he called it Nimruz. It is recorded in Mariash 102-104, from where Mitra is said to stretch its arm and hold the two ends of the landmass. So in Mariash it says Mitra, that is the sun, stretches its arm and holds the two ends of the landmass, Australia and Japan, Africa and Europe. I propose that we petition UNESCO to name 63 degrees longitude as the meridian of Zarathustra. We don't want London to use its meridian, keep it, but name that after Zarathustra. So this is the meridian of Zarathustra. When the sun is at midday position at 63 degrees, there's sunshine from here to there. And this is, you can go on the internet and get it yourself. This is how it is, this is the truth. And that's why they call Japan the land of the rising sun, because the sun rises from here and goes there. And when it's at midday position, the whole hemisphere has sunshine. And if you see, this is 153 degrees and that is 27 degrees. Add that and that's 180.
Yeah.
Got it?
Yeah.
Now, the second thing that he calculated. He also calculated that in the year 1725 BCE, the sun will rise in the kingdom of Balkh exactly at the same moment in time as the vernal equinox. Every day we have sunrise. Every day we have sunrise. And once in a year twice in a year we have equinox. One is the vernal equinox and one is the autumnal equinox. The vernal equinox is the one that we celebrate Nowruz. Now we celebrate that at different hours of the day, whenever the equinox happens, because equinox is when the sun just crosses the equator, when we are looking from it from here, it just crosses. It takes a second to do that. At that very moment, the sun is also shining, right? But since the earth is moving, it will shine somewhere differently every year. And why will it shine differently? Because it's not 366 days, it is 365.2497 blah blah blah. So it will never shine on the same place at the same time when the vernal equinox happens. It will shine at different places. So in Balkh, exactly at the same moment in time as the vernal equinox. In other words, the new year and the new day will start at the same time in Balkh. A once in a lifetime event. He named it Nowruz. He was a poet. He called them Nimruz and he called this Nowruz, midday and new day. New day and informed King Vishtas, who proclaimed the year of 1725 BCE as Nowruz, new day. So every year it is not a Nowruz like we say it. It is when the sun shines at the moment of the equinox on your preferred land. So you are here, you have equinox, and it will be Nowruz for you. This happened. Now we have. I didn't create that 1725. You can go and calculate it. There are websites that give you sunrise and equinox. And if you go for 1725, you will get that in the Balkh area, in the region where Afghanistan and Iran is. At that area, in the year 1725 BCE, the sunrise and the equinox happened at the same minute. The same thing happened in 847 BCE, and there is archaeological evidence in Takht Jamshid in Persepolis. This is the platform on which they have covered it, of course, to protect it because people will others walk on it. There was this platform, and on this there was a pillar. Even today, on the first sunrise after Nowruz, if you go there, and I talked to the people who were there, the guides and everybody, and they say yes, people come here. Those who are knowledgeable, they come here on the first day of Nowruz to see the sunrise from here. Because the first rays of the sun today even shines on this platform. In 487 BC, they had a pillar on it, and there is a hole over here. It shows nothing. The pillar is gone. They had a pillar. On the dot of the equinox, the sun shone on this pillar. And that was why they created Apadana, the palace by Darius, because Darius was ruling. And if you go around the palace of Darius, it is all about celebration of Nowruz. The people bringing gifts, the famous thing that you see, that's all around this palace. In the other palaces there are different things, but here it is all about celebrating Nowruz, and that was the real Nowruz that they celebrated. And if you go and check 487 BC, you will find the hour of the minute of the sunrise with the minute of the equinox. Perfect match. And how rare it is. In the 200 years, from 2000 to 2200, this is going to happen only 7 times in present boundaries of Iran. I'm trying to show you how rare it is. The next one that's going to happen is going to be in Kerman in 2028. The equinox is at 2:16:39. That's the Greenwich time. Local time is 5:45:39, and local sunrise is 5:45:10. Now, a few kilometers here and there will give you the exact time, because these timings are based on the airport, so to say, in Kerman. Like here, when they tell you the weather or they say something, they tell you according to the temperature that's recorded by the airport. So this is same thing in Iran now. But if you go a kilometer here or a kilometer there, you'll get the exact place where you can put a pillar and see the sun shining on it when the equinox happens. So Yaz 2061, and it goes like that 3 times in the year 2000 and 4 times in the year 21. That's all that is going to happen. So it's a very rare event. It cannot repeat at the same spot again because of the fraction in which the earth goes around the sun. So it's a once in a lifetime event for that place and mostly for many people. So now we come to 2028 is far away. Let's go to the nearest one, that is 2024. All this says it won't happen. 2024, the equinox is going to happen at the same time of sunrise on this line. And if you look at that line, Arbil and Kirkuk, 2 Kurdish towns in Iraq, are going to have that. And luckily for us, there is a large group of Kurds who have claimed the ancestral religion of Zoroastrianism and have come out in the open. About 20,000 of them have registered. There are another 100,000 who are waiting. They come to the function, they come and meet the people, they have declared themselves, but they are afraid of the mullahs still. And they contacted them, given them the information. Even the government of Kurdistan, which is a very liberal government, and the Minister of Religion, the Deputy Minister of Religion, has declared himself to be a Gartoshki, but has kept it back because he's in the ministry, he didn't want to get into trouble. But anyways, they are going to help celebrate it. And I request all of you to put it in your program, to be there and claim ownership. Don't lose it, it is yours. You have to be there to claim ownership. 2028 is far away, 2024 is near. Let's celebrate it, let's join them. We'll pass on the information to all of you guys through various organizations and make it a point to come. I did my sharing. Thank you for listening. Please free to ask any questions. Thank you.